This is Tony T here from TonySpicks.com with our college football pick show here. This one here is for Saturday, September the 4th. We'll have picks from we've got 44 games on Saturday, so we'll picks from all 44 games on Saturday. For more free pick videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Lots of free picks over our channel delivered by myself, as well as our team of cappers here at TonySpicks.com, making this a great channel to subscribe to. Give us a like, a thumbs up, we greatly appreciate it. And then visit our site, TonySpicks.com, for our best bets, our premium plays are here. Check out our top performers, guys like Sean Higgs, Rod up on the leaderboard, yours truly, Brian Bittler, last 7 days, last 30 days has been red hot. You can see Brian Palmer up there on the leaderboard, Mills hitting the board as well. DeAndre Stevenson, you see him on our night move show and morning shows as well. Ramon and Jorge as well. All these guys on our live shows. Click links to the hot cap to get signed up to our long-term subscriptions. Our premium plays here send the page with best bets and more will be locked and loaded for this big Saturday card. Remember, all of our one-day passes are profit guaranteed, and they must turn a profit amount purchased is credit back to your account for site credits. That's profit guaranteed. And then our promo code TonyT at checkout will knock off that 15%. The link's in the description to get signed up. So let's go ahead. Let's get this one underway. I got Air Force and Navy for Saturday. All right, here we've got the Air Force falling to 1-3 after their 44-35 home defeat to Hawaii. The Falcons rushed for 216 yards for 6.5 yards a carry and moved the football through the air. They limited the Warriors on the ground, but allowed 457 yards passing for 9.5 yards per pass attempt. Josh Johnson missed the game. There it was Liam Zarka going 10 of 12 for 278 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. He rushed for 139 yards. Navy 4-0, a 21-13 home victory against Rice. The midshipmen rushed for 283 yards for 5.9 yards a carry and were efficient passing. They limited the Rice on the ground and allowed only 5.4 yards per pass attempt. Blake Horvath, 8 of 13 passing for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. They played to under a total of 50 in 5 straight meetings. Each team plays a triple option and knows how to defend by seeing it in practice every week. Navy at home allowing 2.6 yards per rush. The pick here will be Air Force and Navy under 50. Boston College and Pittsburgh, this one for Saturday. BC fell to 1-3 after their 28-24 home defeat to California. The Golden Eagles rushed for 178 yards for 8.5 yards a carry and were poor in the passing game. They limited Cal on the ground but allowed 254 yards passing for 7.5 yards per pass attempt. Dylan Longren, 21 of 37 passing for 197 yards and 2 picks. He had a rushing touchdown. Pitt now drops to 2-2. A 34-27 home defeat to Louisville. The Panthers rushed for only 80 yards and moved the football through the air. They limited the Cardinals to under 2 yards a carry, but gave up 339 yards passing for 6.6 yards per pass attempt. Eli Holstein, 14 of 26 passing for 228 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. 2 straight losses in conference for the Panthers that they have allowed 31 points or greater in each game. BC has had success rushing the football, 5.3 yards a carry and averaging 265 yards passing per game. Pittsburgh in conference has struggled running the football and with quarterback accuracy. Pick here, Boston College plus 6.5. Clemson and North Carolina, this one here for Saturday. Clemson fell to 1-3 after their 34-21 home defeat to Syracuse. Tigers rushed for 140 yards for 6.5 yards a carry and were inefficient in the passing game. They allowed 155 yards rushing to the Orange for 4.1 yards a carry and 7.1 yards per pass attempt. Cade Klubnik, 37 of 60 for 363 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. North Carolina sits at 2-2, a 34-9 road defeat at UCF. Tar Heels produced poor results offensively in the run and pass. They surrendered 134 yards rushing for 3.9 yards a carry with 223 passing yards for 7 yards per pass attempt. Gio Lopez, 11 of 14 passes for 87 yards and 2 picks. North Carolina has been pounded in both of their games against Power 5 conference schools, losing by 34 at home to TCU and at UCF by 25. Clemson defense is allowing 3.5 yards per run and moving the football through the air for 249 yards a game. North Carolina is getting poor work at quarterback and on defense give up 69% completions. They have looked overmatched in talent and in their losses against the Power 5 schools. The Tigers, 3-0 to the spread on the road, following a home loss. North Carolina 0-3 of the spread. As a road underdog pick here will be Clemson -14. Ohio and Ball State for Saturday. Ohio is 3-2 after their 34-20 home victory against Bowling Green. The Bobcats rushed for 231 yards for 5.9 yards a carry and were effective in the passing game. They allowed 180 yards rushing the Falcons for 5 yards a carry and limit them though in the passing game. Parker Navarro 17-25 passes for 208 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. He rushed for 66 yards and 2 scores. Ball State 1-3 after a 31-25 road defeat to UConn. The Cardinals rushed for 176 yards for 7 yards to carry and moved the football through the air. They surrendered 217 rushing yards for 5.9 yards to carry and 6 yards per pass attempt. Kyle Kelly in the game, 17-24 passing for 209 yards with a touchdown and pick. Ohio defensively this season is allowing 5 yards per rush with 68% completion rate for 8.7 yards per pass attempt. Ball State getting accurate quarterback play and rushing for just over 4 yards to carry. The Bobcats allowed 35 points at home to FCS Gardner-Webb in a field cover, but won the game at home. The Cardinals 10-2 the spread at home. We're going to take the points here, take the plus here with Ball State. Army and UAB going off here on Saturday. Army 1-3 after their 28-6 road defeat to East Carolina. The Black Knights rushed for 242 yards for 4.6 yards a carry, and they passed poorly. Defensively, they allowed 3.6 yards a carry, but 251 yards passing for 11.5 yards per pass attempt. Dwayne Coleman, 5-9 passing for 36 yards. He rushed for 51 yards and a touchdown. UAB 2-2 after their 56-24 road defeat in Tennessee. The Blazers rushed for just over 1 yard a carry and moved the football through the air. They allowed 510 yards to the Volunteers with poor performance against the run and pass. Jalen Kitna, 38-51 passing for 364 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. UAB faced a triple option team in Navy and lost 38-24 on the road. Army is running for 4.5 yards a carry, with the Blazers allowing 223 yards rushed per game with 5 yards per attempt. The Black Knights are 6-1 of the spread on the road on field turf. UAB 2-5 the spread as the home underdog. Pick here will be Army -7. All right, we're going to start here with Iowa State and Cincinnati for Saturday. Iowa State improved to 5-0 after their 39-14 home victory against Arizona. The Cyclones were limited on the ground, but effectively threw the football. On defense, they allowed 4.5 yards a carry with 253 passing yards for 5.3 yards per pass attempt. Rocco Beck in the game, 14-20 passing for 243 yards with an interception. He had 3 rushing touchdowns. Cincinnati 3-1 with their 37-34 road win in Kansas. Bearcats finished with 603 yards with effective rushing and passing. They allowed 5.6 yards per rush with 445 yards passing for 16 yards per pass attempt. Brendan Sorsby here, 29-43 passing for 388 yards and 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 52 yards in the game. Iowa State has 2 wins away from home this year. The Bearcats' home wins came against FCS teams at Northwestern State and Bowling Green, which inflated their stats. They are allowing 74% completions for 8.1 yards per pass attempt. Iowa State is holding opponents to 3.9 yards per rush and only 5.8 yards per pass attempt. The Cyclones 3-1 straight up and to the spread as a road underdog. Cincinnati 1-3 to the spread at home against winning teams. Pick your Iowa State here +1.5. Illinois and Purdue for Saturday. All right, we've got Illinois now 4-1 after a 34-32 home victory against USC. Final Illini gained 5.2 yards per rush with success. 502 yards with success rushing and passing. They allowed 3.7 yards per rush to the Trojans with 364 yards passing for 8.5 yards per pass attempt. Luke Altmaier 20-26 passing for 328 yards with 2 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. Purdue 2-2, a 56-30 road defeat at Notre Dame. That was 2 weeks ago. The Boilermakers' run game produced just 2.7 yards a carry, but they moved the football through the air. They gave up 254 yards rushing for nearly 6 yards a carry and 14 yards per pass attempt defensively there. Ryan Brown completed 21-34 passing for 250 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Purdue is coming off the bye week. They have improved quarterback play as they're passing for 280 yards per game, 8.6 yards per pass attempt. Illinois on the road has allowed 5.5 yards per rush, 74% completion rate for 10 yards per pass attempt. The final line looked bad in their conference road defeated Indiana, so we'll take Purdue here plus the 9.5. Wisconsin and Michigan going off here on Saturday. Wisconsin drops to 2-2 after a 27-10 home defeat to Maryland. The Badgers rushed for less than 2 yards a carry, and with pedestrian passing numbers, they limit the Terrapins to under 3 yards per rush with 265 yards passing for 7.8 yards per pass attempt. Billy Edwards, 1 of 3 passing for 45 yards and couldn't really continue with his knee injury. He had missed the previous 2 games. Daniel O'Neal came in 14 of 22 passes for 120 yards with a pick. Michigan now 3-2 with a 30-27 road win at Nebraska. Wolverines rushed for 286 yards for 8.7 yards a carry and ineffective in the passing game. They limit the Cornhuskers to 43 rushing yards with 308 yards passing for 7.5 yards per pass attempt. Bryce Underwood here, 12 of 22 passing, 105 yards with a rushing touchdown. And the Badgers' conversion back to the power game has not really worked. They're only running for 3.3 yards a carry. Their pass defense has really struggled, giving up 8.2 yards per pass attempt. The Wolverines' offense has performed well, 7 yards per rush, 74% completion rate, 9.4 yards per pass attempt. The Wolverines are holding opponents to 2.4 yards to carry on the ground. The Badgers, in their lone road game, were blown out in Alabama 38-14, and they gave up 382 yards passing for nearly 13 yards per pass attempt. Wisconsin 1-4 in the spread as road underdog. Wolverines 5-1 in the spread at home following a road game. Pick here, Michigan laying the 16.5. Kansas State and Baylor going off here on Saturday. Kansas State now 2-3 after a 34-20 home victory against UCF. The Wildcats rushed for 266 yards for 6 yards a carry. They allowed 205 yards rushing to the Knights for 6.2 yards per rush and 7.6 yards per pass attempt. Avery Johnson, 18-25 passes for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 75 yards. Baylor 3-2, a 45-27 road win at Oklahoma State. The Bears rushed for 219 yards for 5.6 yards a carry and were effective in the passing game. They allowed 4.9 yards per rush to the Cowboys with 291 yards passing for 6.3 yards per pass attempt. Sawyer Robertson here, 24 of 35 passing for 393 yards with 4 touchdowns. He rushed for a score. Baylor has a 3-point home loss to Arizona State and gave up 45 on the road at SMU. Kansas State has rushed effectively over 5 yards a carry and defended well. The Bears are allowing 181 yards rushing, 4.4 yards a carry, and 7.1 yards per pass attempt. They are 6-9 in the spread on the road. Pick here, Kansas State plus 6.5. Kentucky and Georgia going off on Saturday. Kentucky now 2-2 after a 35-13 road defeat in South Carolina. The Wildcats rushed for 2.6 yards a carry with really few passing attempts here. On defense, they allowed 178 yards rushing to the Gamecocks for 3.7 yards a carry and 10.8 yards per pass attempt. Wildcats had a -4 turnover margin. Herb Boley here, 10 of 19 passes for 124 yards with 2 interceptions and a lost fumble. Georgia sits at 3-1, a 24-21 home defeat to Alabama. The Bulldogs rushed for 227 yards for 6.9 yards a carry and were ineffective throwing the football. They held the Crimson Tide to 3.1 yards a carry, but 280 yards passing allowed for 7.2 yards per pass attempt. Gunnar Stockton, 13 of 20 passing for 130 yards and a touchdown. It's back-to-back road games for the Wildcats. Kentucky is inaccurate quarterback play. Their pass defense allowed 8.2 yards per pass attempt, 250 yards passing a game. Georgia is rushing for over about 5 yards a carry and getting efficient work at quarterback. The Bulldogs have been effective defending the pass. Pick here, Georgia laying the 20.5. UTSA and Temple for Saturday. UTSA now 2-2 after their 17-16 road victory at Colorado State. The Roadrunners rushed for 172 yards for 5.2 yards a carry. They allowed 4.1 yards per rush to the Rams with 254 yards passing for 6.7 yards per pass attempt. On McCown here, 14-27 passing, 473 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. Temple drops at 2-2 with a 45-24 road defeat at Georgia Tech. The Owls generated 184 yards rushing, 4.2 yards a carry, and poor in the passing game. Defensively, they allowed 307 yards rushing to the Yellow Jackets for 10.2 yards per carry, 161 yards passing, 8.9 yards per pass attempt. Evan Simon here, 13-32 passing for 127 yards with a touchdown. He rushed for 68 yards in the game. UTSA has had success running the football, 6.1 yards to carry with an average of 206 yards per game. They have defended the run well. The Owls have struggled to stop the run by allowing 5.9 yards to carry and have not been efficient in the passing game. The Roadrunners 3-1 to the spread on the road, following a bye. Temple 1-4 to the spread at home, facing teams that average 31 points per game or greater. Pick here UTSA minus 6.5. Wake Forest and Virginia Tech. This one going off here on Saturday. Wake Forest is 2-2, a 30-29 home defeat to Georgia Tech. Demon Deacons rushed for 210 yards for 5.3 yards a carry with inaccurate quarterback play. They allowed 163 yards rushing to the Yellow Jackets for 3.9 yards a carry and 5.8 yards per pass attempt. Robbie Ashford, 13-28 passing for 219 yards. He rushed for 82 yards with the score. Virginia Tech now 2-3, a 23-21 road win at North Carolina State. Hokies rushed for 229 yards for 7.5 yards a carry, but inefficient in the passing game. They held the Wolfpack to under 2 yards a carry with 240 passing yards for 7.1 yards per pass attempt. Kyron Jones, 10-34 passing for 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wake Forest is rushing for 5 yards a carry and getting the ball downfield in the passing game with 8.1 yards per pass attempt. They have defended, limiting opponents to 3.5 yards per rush and 5.3 yards per pass attempt. The Hokies have struggled defending the pass this year, surrendering 69% completion rate with 9 yards per pass attempt. They have a 45-26 home defeat to Old Dominion. Demon Deacons are 3-0 to the spread at home, adds an underdog of 3.5 to 10 points. Pick here will be on Wake Forest plus the 8. Western Michigan and UMass going off on Saturday. Western Michigan sits at 2-3 after their 47-14 home victory against FCS Rhode Island. 2 weeks ago, it was a 14-13 home victory against Toledo. The Broncos rushed for 90 yards for 2.5 yards a carry. They allowed 191 yards rushing to the Rockets here for 4.5 yards a carry and shut down their passing game. Brock Lowry here, 15-20 passing for 143 yards with a touchdown. He rushed for 52 yards and a score. UMass 0-4 with a 42-6 road defeat at Missouri. Minutemen were held to 19 yards and ineffective in the passing game. They allowed 521 yards to the Tigers and unable to stop the run or pass. A.J. Hairston, 11 of 31 passing for 75 yards with a touchdown and a pick. 8 straight losses for UMass, including a loss to an FCS team and a 32-point loss in the opener at home against Temple. Western Michigan has defended well, holding teams to 4 yards a carry and only 6.5 yards per pass attempt. UMass rushing for 2.5 yards a carry with inaccurate passing. Defensively, they're giving up nearly 5 yards a carry on the ground with 270 yards passing for 8 yards per pass attempt. The Broncos 2-1 to the spread on the road, facing teams that average 310 yards per game or fewer. UMass 4-9 to the spread at home. Pick here Western Michigan laying the 12.5. Oklahoma State and Arizona for Saturday. Oklahoma State drops to 1-3 after their 45-27 home defeat to Baylor. The Cowboys rushed for 157 yards for 4.9 yards a carry and moved the football through the air. They put up 612 yards on the Bears and were unable to top their run. They gave up 612 yards to the Bears and they were unable to stop their run or pass. St. Flores in the game. He goes 23 of 41 for 232 yards. Arizona now 3-1 with a 39-14 road defeat to Iowa State. The Wildcats rushed for 4.4 yards a carry and ineffective in their passing game. They limited the Cyclones' ground attack but allowed 288 yards passing for 13 yards per pass attempt. Noah Fafita here, 32 of 48 passes for 253 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. When State defense has been bad against the run and pass, they can move the football through the air. Arizona running for nearly 5 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. Cowboys 6-2 the over as a road underdog. Pick here will be Oklahoma State and Arizona over 55.5. Eastern Michigan and Buffalo going off here on Saturday. Eastern Michigan 1-4 after a 24-13 road defeat at Central Michigan. The Eagles rushed for 123 yards for 4.2 yards a carry and were inefficient in the passing game. They surrendered 360 yards rushing to the Chippewas for 6 yards a carry with 7.4 yards per pass attempt. Noah Kim 17 of 28 passing for 175 yards with an interception and rushing touchdown. Buffalo fell to 2-3 with a 29-17 home defeat to UConn. The Bulls rushed for 204 yards for 4.9 yards a carry, but were ineffective with their passing game. They limited the Huskies' passing attack and allowed 165 yards rushing for 5.3 yards a carry. Daquan Roberson missed the UConn game, but is probable here. The senior was completing 62% of his passes with 7 yards per pass attempt and a threat to run. But 2 straight home losses and a 3-point win at Kent State makes it a tough back in the Bulls lane, double digits at home. EMU covered the road game at Kentucky. They put up 23 points on them. They are rushing for over 5 yards a carry, over 4.5 yards a carry, and throwing downfield at 7.1 yards per pass attempt. Buffalo's passing game has been inaccurate and inefficient. The Eagles 3-1 to the spread on the road in back-to-back road games. Buffalo 1-4 to the spread at home against losing teams. Pick here will be Eastern Michigan plus the 10. All right, we start off here with Virginia and Louisville for Saturday. Virginia now 4-1 after a 46-38 home victory against Florida State in overtime. Cavs rushed for 211 yards for 4.4 yards a carry. They allowed 514 yards to Seminoles, struggling defending the run and pass. Chad Morris here, North Texas transfer, completed 26 of 35 passes, 229 yards with 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. He rushed for 3 touchdowns in the game. Louisville now 4-0 after their 34-27 road victory at Pittsburgh. Cardinals overcame a 17-0 deficit after one quarter. They struggled to run the football and move the football through the air. They contained the Panthers on the ground but allowed 259 yards passing for 8.1 yards per pass attempt. Miller Moss here, 33 of 51 passing for 339 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. He had a rushing touchdown in the game. Virginia's gone over in all 5 games behind their North Texas transfer quarterback and their up-tempo style. The Cavs rushed for nearly 6 yards a carry. They're getting accurate, efficient passing as they throw for 296 yards a game. This up-tempo will take a toll, though, on their defense as this season progresses. Louisville has excelled through the air this season, averaging 279 yards a game with accuracy at the quarterback and 7.8 yards per pass attempt. Cardinals are 9-5 the over as a home favorite. Pick here Virginia and Louisville to go over 61. Central Michigan and Akron. This one going off on Saturday. We've got here Central Michigan now 3-2 after a 24-13 home victory against Eastern Michigan. Chippewas rushed for 306 yards, and that's 6 yards a carry in the game. For them, they eliminated the Eagles on the ground and allowed 175 yards passing for 6.3 yards per pass attempt. Joe Labas here, 14 of 16 passing, 138 yards and a touchdown. Akron, they're now 1-4, a 45-3 road defeat to Toledo. Zips rushed for under 2 yards a carry and ineffective in the passing game. They allowed 545 yards to the Zips. They were unable to stop the run or pass. Ben Finley in the game missed the game due to injury. Michael Johnson, 7 of 13, passing just 28 yards. Akron quarterback situation is a concern. The Chippewas are a high-volume rushing team that can just make big plays in the passing game. Akron is getting bad quarterback play, and their defense doesn't stop anything. The Chips can grind it on the ground and on the road here to cover. We'll take Central Michigan -8. Syracuse and SMU for Saturday. Syracuse drops to 3-2 after their 38-3 home defeat to Duke. The Orange rushed for 3.1 yards a carry and was ineffective in the passing game. They allowed 235 yards rushing to the Blue Devils for 6.4 yards a carry and 9.6 yards per pass attempt. Ricky Collins, 24 of 37 passing for 229 yards with a pick. SMU fell to 2-2 with a 35-24 road defeat to TCU. Mustangs rushed for 3.5 yards a carry, but moved the football through the air. They allowed 3.7 yards per rush to the Horned Frogs, but 379 yards passing for 9.5 yards per pass attempt. Kevin Jennings here, 24 of 38 passing for 290 yards with 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. Injury to Syracuse starting quarterback Steve Angeli is massive here. Looks like a drop in class to Collins. Syracuse defense is allowing 5.5 yards a carry with 291 yards passing. SMU passing attack has been accurate and efficient. The Orange 0-5 the spread on the road facing teams that allow 5.9 yards per play or fewer. The Mustangs are 7-1 the spread at home following a road game. Pick here SMU minus 17.5. Boise State and Notre Dame going off on Saturday. Boise State now 3-1 after a 47-14 home victory at App State. Broncos rushed for 3.5 yards a carry and are effective in the passing game. They held the Mountaineers to 65 yards passing. Max Madsen here, 25 of 37 passing for 321 yards with 4 touchdowns. Notre Dame 2-2 after a 56-13 road victory at Arkansas. Fine Irish gained 641 yards with exceptional rushing and passing. They allowed 158 yards rushing to the Razorbacks for 5.3 yards a carry and limited them through the pass. C.J. Carr, 22 of 30 for 354 yards and 4 touchdowns. Boise State improved since their opening loss at USF. They have been efficient on offense with 5.9 yards per rush and 300 yards passing for 8.5 yards per pass attempt. Notre Dame has issues defending the pass, allowing 269 yards per game, 7.7 yards per pass attempt. They are 1-3 to the spread at home, following a road win. Pick here Boise State plus 20.5. James Madison and Georgia State going off on Saturday. James Madison improved to 3-1 after their 35-10 home victory against Georgia Southern. The Dukes rushed for 331 yards for 6.2 yards a carry. They limited yardage through the air. They held the Eagles to 27 yards rushing for 6.9 yards per pass attempt. Alonzo Barnett here in the game, 11 of 22 passing for 148 yards with a touchdown. He had a rushing score. Georgia State drops to 1-3 with a 70-21 road defeat at Vanderbilt. The Panthers rushed for 32 yards and were ineffective in the passing game. They gave up 634 yards to the Commodores and were unable to stop the run or pass. T.J. Finley, 22 of 35 passing for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns. Georgia State has failed to cover 7 of 8. They are giving up 48 points per game and 5.6 yards per rush, 9.1 yards per pass attempt. JMU is playing great defense, holding opponents at 2.9 yards per rush, 47% completion rate. The Dukes 7-4 the spread as road favorite. Pick here James Madison minus 19.5. Miami, Ohio, and Northern Illinois for Saturday. Miami O improved to 1-3 after a 38-9 home victory at FCS Lindenwood. The prior week it was a 41-38 home defeat to UNLV. The Red Hawks moved the football effectively through the air, but 131 rushing and 6 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 515 yards to the Rebels with poor work against the run and pass. Daquan Finn here, 7-12 passing for 131 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. He left the game due to injury and missed last week. Henry Heston here, 8-17 in relief for 134 yards and a score. Northern Illinois sits at 1-3 after a 6-3 home defeat to San Diego State. Huskies rushed for 3 yards a carry and were ineffective in the passing game. They limited the Aztecs' passing game, allowed 151 yards rushing for 3.4 yards a carry. Josh Holtz in the game, 6-14 passing for 49 yards. Miami Ohio quarterback situation is a concern here. The Huskies have defended well this year. They faced a tough schedule with Mississippi State and Maryland on the road. Miami Ohio has no wins against FBS competition, so we'll take Northern Illinois here plus 5. Monroe and Northwestern going off here on Saturday. We got the Monroe now 3-1 after a 28-16 home victory against Arkansas State. The Warhawks rushed for 217 yards for 6.6 yards a carry and were able to move the football through the air. They limited the Red Wolves to 17 rushing yards and 6.2 yards per pass attempt. Aiden Armenta, 16-25 passes for 175 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. Northwestern now 2-2 after a 17-14 home victory here against UCLA. The Wildcats built a 17-0 second quarter lead and held on to victory. They rushed for 199 yards for 4.7 yards a carry with ineffective passing. They allowed 4.5 yards a carry to the Bruins on the ground and 180 yards passing for 4.5 yards a carry per pass attempt, I should say. Preston Stone here, 12 of 18 passing, 115 yards and a touchdown. Monroe rushing for 5.9 yards a carry and have been good stopping the run, just 2.9 yards allowed per carry. Northwestern is struggling defending the run, gave almost 5.5 yards a carry. They're getting poor quarterback play. The Warhawks 3-1 to the spread as an underdog of 10.5 to 21 points. Northwestern 1-5 here to the spread in back-to-back home games. Pick here Monroe plus 11.5. Oregon State and Appalachian State, this one for Saturday. Oregon State fell to 0-5 after a 27-24 home defeat to Houston in overtime. The Beavers rushed for 189 yards for 3.9 yards a carry and moved the football through the air. They held the Cougars to under 3 yards per rush, but 270 yards passing allowed for 7.5 yards per pass attempt. McMurphy here, 20 of 33 passes for 201 yards with a touchdown. App State now 2-2 after a 47-14 road defeat at Boise State. Mountaineers were poor in the passing game and rushed for 119 yards for 4.1 yards a carry. Defensively, they allowed 3.5 yards per rush to the Broncos, but 321 yards passing for 8.4 yards per pass attempt. A.J. Swan here, 11 of 24 passing for 64 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. Oregon State is desperate for a win and have played a tougher schedule. App State got past FCS Lindenwood at home by only 7 points, scoring just 20 points. Mountaineers 0-3 the spread as a home favorite. Pick here Oregon State plus 1.5. Vanderbilt and Alabama. Vanderbilt, Alabama. We'll get it right here for Saturday. All right, we've got Vanderbilt 5-0 after their 55-35 home victory against Utah State. Commodores gained 543 yards with success rushing and passing. They allowed 4.8 yards a carry to the Aggies with 274 passing yards for 7.2 yards per pass attempt. Diego Pavia, 26 of 34 for 321 yards, 5 touchdowns and a pick. He rushed for 75 yards and a score. Alabama 3-1 after a 24-21 road victory in Georgia. The Crimson Tide rushed for just 3 yards a carry, but successful in the passing game. They limited the Bulldogs on the ground, but surrendered 227 yards rushing for 6.9 yards per rush. Tide Simpson in the game, 24 of 38 passing for 276 yards. 2 touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown. Vanderbilt's offensive numbers are good. 6.7 yards a carry, 71% completion rate for 9.5 yards per pass attempt. They have defended well, allowing 3 yards per rush and 5.9 yards per pass attempt. Alabama ground attack has been limited to 3.9 yards a carry. The Commodores 7-4 the spread as a road underdog. Pick here Vanderbilt plus 10.5. Washington and Maryland going off here on Saturday. We got Washington here falling to 3-1 here after a 24-6 home defeat to Ohio State. The Huskies rushed for only 2 yards a carry and struggled in the passing game. They allowed 149 yards rushing to the Buckeyes for 4.4 yards a carry, with 208 yards passing for 7.4 yards per pass attempt. Devin Williams here, 18 of 22 passing for 173 yards. Maryland now 4-0 after a 27-10 road win at Wisconsin. Terrapins rushed for 61 yards, but effectively threw the football. They limited the Badgers to 1.5 yards per rush and 235 yards passing for 6.7 yards per pass attempt. Washington in the game 18 of 34 for 265 yards with 2 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. Maryland has the better quality win, going to Wisconsin with a sound victory. They are moving the football through the air and defending well, holding teams at 2.5 yards per rush and 5.6 yards per pass attempt. Washington 3-7 to the spread on the road against the conference. Pick here will be on Maryland plus 6.5. All right, next up, Penn State and UCLA going off here on Saturday. All right, we got Penn State 3-1 after a 30-24 home defeat to Oregon. The Lions rushed for 4 yards a carry and were ineffective in the passing game. They allowed 176 yards rushing to the Ducks for 4.5 yards a carry, along with 248 passing yards for 6.2 yards per pass attempt. Drouillard, 14-25 passing for 137 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. UCLA sits at 0-4. A 17-14 road defeat at Northwestern. The Bruins fell behind 17-0 in the second quarter and couldn't rally all the way back. They rushed for 131 yards for 4.5 yards a carry. They surrendered 200 yards rushing to the Wildcats for 4.7 yards a carry and limited their passing game. Nico Ileva, 19-27 passes for 180 yards and a touchdown. He rushed for 65 yards in the game. UCLA has been blown out in their 2 home games by 33 to Utah, 25 to New Mexico. Penn State is balanced offensively as they're rushing for over 5 yards a carry and effectively throwing the football. They got that experience at quarterback. Nittany Lions defense holds opponents to 3.3 yards per rush and 5.2 yards per pass attempt. The Bruins in their home losses allowed nearly 6 yards a carry on the ground, 79% completions, 8.5 yards per pass attempt. Nittany Lions coming off of the loss of the Ducks will look to impress with their bounce back spot here with their foot on the pedal. This is a foot on the pedal spot here. Penn State 3-0 to the spread as road favorite, 21.5 to 31 points. UCLA 4-10 the spread at home. Pick here will be on Penn State minus 24.5. Whoops, sorry, I had the wrong game up there. How did I screw that up? Hang on. I went through this whole thing with that game up there. Oh boy. Hang on 1 second here. Nope. I made things even worse. What am I doing here? Let's see. Yeah, we want Penn State in the game. We want to show you the right graphic. There we go. How did we screw that up? All right, we got Texas and Florida going off on Saturday. Texas now 3-1 after a 55-0 home victory against Sam Houston State. Longhorns gained 607 yards in the game, effective rushing and passing. They limited the Bearcats to 27 yards rushing and 86 passing. Arch Manning, 18-21 passing, 309 yards with 3 touchdowns. He rushed for 2 scores. Florida 1-3 after a 26-7 road defeat to Miami. The Gators, struggled on the ground with 2.8 yards per rush and ineffective passing. They allowed 184 yards rushing to the Hurricanes with 4 yards a carry and limited their passing game. G.J. Lagway, 12-23 passing for 61 yards. Florida's been held to 16 or fewer points in their past 3 games, all resulting in defeats. Texas offense balanced nearly 5 yards per rush, 8.1 yards per pass attempt. They defended the run and pass well. The Gators have been inefficient in the passing game. Both teams coming off a bye. Longhorns 3-0 to the spread as a road favorite of 7 or fewer points. Pick here, Texas, laying the 6.5. FIU and UConn going off here on Saturday. All right, we've got here FIU 2-2 after a 38-16 home defeat to Delaware. The Panthers rushed for 160 yards for 4.7 yards a carry, but were inefficient in the passing game. They allowed 140 rushing yards to the Blue Hens with 4.5 yards a carry with limited production in the passing game. Hayon Jenkins, 22 of 34 passing for 203 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. He had a rushing score. UConn 3-2 after a 20-17 road victory at Buffalo. Huskies rushed for 165 yards for 5.3 yards a carry, but inefficient in the passing game. They limited the Bulls' passing game, but allowed 204 rushing yards for 4.9 yards a carry here. Joe Fagnano, 19 of 31 passing, 155 yards with a touchdown. He rushed for 65 yards in the game. Huskies have been competitive in their games. They have been efficient offensively, about 6.5 yards per rush, 269 yards passing for 7.3 yards per pass attempt. FIU has not been efficient passing on the year. UConn battled Syracuse to a 7-point road loss. We'll take UConn here laying the 7. Texas State and Arkansas State going off on Saturday. Texas State sits at 3-1 after a 35-3 home victory at FCS school Nicholls State. 2 weeks ago, it was a 34-15 road defeat at Arizona State. The Bobcats rushed for 119 yards for 2.8 yards a carry with ineffective passing. They surrendered 245 yards rushing to the Sun Devils for 5.8 yards a carry, along with 7.5 yards per pass attempt. Brad Jackson in the game, 25 of 26 passing for 184 yards and a score. He had a rushing touchdown. Arkansas State fought a 1-4 with a 28-16 road defeat to UL Monroe. Red Wolves rushed for only 17 yards, were inefficient in the passing game. They allowed 217 rushing yards to the Warhawks for 6.6 yards a carry, along with 7 yards per pass attempt. Jalen Raynor in the game, 29 of 46 passing, 288 yards and a touchdown. The Red Wolves have covered both of their home games. They battled Iowa State at home to an 8-point loss. The Bobcats defense on the road allowing 35 points a game with 6.4 yards per rush, 449 yards overall per game. At home, the Red Wolves have been effectively, throwing the football, limiting opponents on the ground and through the air. They are 5-3. The spread as home dog. Pick here will be on. Again, what did we do here? Put the wrong game up there again? Hang on a second, guys. There we go. The pick here will be on Arkansas State here at plus the 13.5. All right, we got Michigan State and Nebraska going off here on Saturday. Michigan State fell to 3-1 after a 45-31 road defeat here at USC. Spartans rushed for 112 yards for 3.5 yards a carry and effective in the passing game. They surrendered 523 yards to the Trojans, struggling both in defending the run and pass. Aiden Childs, 12 of 21 passes for 212 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown in the game. Nebraska 3-1 after a 30-27 home defeat to Michigan. Cornhuskers were held to 43 rushing yards, but moved the football effectively through the air. They limited the Wolverines' passing attack, but allowed 286 yards rushing for 8.7 yards a carry. Dylan Riallo, 30 of 41 passing for 308 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. Both teams come off a bye. The Spartans were effective throwing the football against USC's defense in that road defeat. On the year, they're completing 68% of their throws, 8.4 yards per attempt, and they're putting up 34 points a game. The Cornhuskers are struggling to stop the run by allowing 5.3 yards a carry, with 175 yards rushing per game. Nebraska 0-5 the spread at home, facing teams that allow 120 yards rushing per game or fewer. Pick here Michigan State, plus the 11.5. All right, Kent and Oklahoma for Saturday. All right, we've got Kent here 1-3 after a 6-10 road defeat at Florida State. Golden Flashes rushed for under 2 yards a carry and were ineffective in the passing game. They allowed 775 yards to the Seminoles, unable to stop the run or pass. Drew Shields in the game, 9 of 18 for 129 yards with a touchdown and pick. Oklahoma 4-0 after a 24-17 home victory against Auburn. Sooners only rushed for 32 yards, but moved the football through the air. They limited the Tigers to 1.9 yards per rush with 220 passing yards for 6.7 yards per pass attempt. Michael Hawkins will start for an injured John Mateer, who could miss up to 3 games. Oklahoma has a 41-point road win at Temple. Kent has been blown out at Florida State by 56 and at Texas Tech by 48. Hawkins attempted 120 passes last year, so he has game experience. Golden Flash has offensively averaged just 2.5 yards a carry and have been inaccurate in the passing game. Oklahoma has defended well, meaning Akron will struggle to get points here. Kent State is 2-12 the spread on the road. The Sooners 10-3 the spread as a home favorite. Pick here Oklahoma here minus 45.5. Coastal Carolina and Old Dominion going off here on Saturday. Coastal Carolina now 2-2 after a 38-20 road victory at South Alabama. The Chanticleers rushed for 182 yards for 5.9 yards a carry with an ineffectiveness in the passing game. It allowed 223 yards of rushing for 5 yards a carry and limited them in the passing game. Tad Hudson here, 13-25 passing for 112 yards and a rushing touchdown. Old Dominion 3-1 after a 21-7 home victory against Liberty. The Monarchs gained 499 yards, were effective in running and passing. They limited the Flames to 77 passing yards and 133 yards on the ground for 3 yards a carry. Colton Joseph in the game, 18-26 passing, 271 yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick. He rushed for 76 yards in the game. ODU has pounded their past 2 opponents. They were competitive in a 27-14 road defeat in Indiana. Chanticleers are getting poor quarterback play and running for just 4.3 yards a carry. Monarchs' offense has been good, nearly 7 yards a carry on the ground. Great quarterback play. Coastal Carolina 1-3 of the spread on the road, facing a team that averages 425 yards per game or greater. Pick here Old Dominion minus 20.5. South Alabama and Troy going off here on Saturday. South Alabama 1-4 after their 36-22 road defeat at North Texas. Jaguars rushed for 204 yards for 4.5 yards a carry, but they were inefficient in the passing game. They surrendered 195 yards rushing to the Mean Green with 5 yards a carry with 9 yards per pass attempt. Bishop Davenport 17-34 passing for 195 yards with a touchdown and pick. He rushed for 59 yards and a score. Troy improved to 2-2 after a 21-17 road win at Buffalo. Trojans rushed for 3.5 yards a carry with inefficient passing. They limited the Bulls' passing game, allowed 125 yards of rushing for 3.5 yards per rush. Tucker Hill-Crease 14-24 passing, 148 yards with a touchdown and pick. He rushed for 50 yards and a score. Another loss by the Jaguars at home to Coastal Carolina by 18 is a concern here. The South Alabama here is allowing 5.2 yards per rush. Troy is defending the run well. It's the third game for Hill-Crease, replacing an injured Goose Crowder, who led the team with a road win he did lead the team with a road win last week. This Hill-Crease. South Alabama 5-9 the spread on the road. Trojans 3-1 to the spread at home, facing a team that allows 31 points or greater. We'll take Troy here minus 1.5. FAU and Rice going off here on Saturday. FAU drops to 1-3 after a 55-26 home defeat to Memphis. The Owls, though, were limited on the ground, but were able to gather yards through the air. On defense, they allowed 487 yards to the Tigers with no success stopping the run or pass. Kane Camp here, 31-50 passing for 318 yards. He rushed for 20 yards and a score. Rice 3-2 after a 21-13 road defeat at Navy. Owls were limited on the ground and through the air. They gave up 455 yards to the midshipmen with poor defense against the run and pass. Chase Jenkins here, 12-21 passing for 114 yards and a touchdown. Rice has moved the triple option, running at high volume, averaging 51 yards rushing per game. Rushing attempts, 51 rushing attempts per game for nearly 4.5 yards a carry. They have defended well, holding foes to 20 points per game with only 51% completion rate. FAU 4.8 yards per rush with 174 rushing yards. FAU 4-8 to the spread as a run dog. Rice 7-2 the spread at home, following a loss. Pick here Rice minus 4.5. UNLV and Wyoming, this one for Saturday. UNLV now 4-0 after a 41-38 road victory at Miami, Ohio. The Rebels rushed for 222 yards for 5.2 yards a carry. They allowed 396 yards to the Redhawks with struggles defending the run and pass. Anthony Calandria, 29-43 passing for 293 yards for 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. He rushed for 54 yards in the game. Wyoming 2-2 with their 37-20 road defeat at Colorado. The Cowboys rushed for 4 yards a carry and were able to move the football through the air. They allowed 497 yards to the bus with poor defense against the run and pass. Cade Anderson, 11-25 passing for 176 yards with 2 touchdowns. UNLV posting some really good offensive numbers with 5.5 yards per rush and efficient quarterback play. Defensively, they have issues against the run and pass. Wyoming is getting Akron an inefficient quarterback in Akron and inefficient quarterback play and struggles on defense against the run. The Rebels are 13-4 the spread on the road. Pick here UNLV minus 3.5. Texas Tech and Houston going off on Saturday. Texas Tech now 4-0 after a 34-10 road win at Utah. The Red Raiders gained 484 yards with success on the ground and air. They limited the Red Raiders to 3.3 yards a carry with 162 passing yards for 5 yards per attempt. Baron Morton here, 12 of 19 passing for 142 yards with 2 interceptions. Houston 4-0 after a 27-24 road win at Oregon State. The Cougars rushed for only 2.8 yards a carry but moved the football through the air. On defense, they held the Beavers to 3.8 yards a carry with 201 passing yards for 6.1 yards per pass attempt. Connor Wegman in the game, 20 of 36 passing, 270 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. Cougars have a home win against Colorado by 16. They are defending well, holding teams to 3.3 yards per rush, 4.9 yards per pass attempt. Houston 3-1 to the spread at home, facing teams with a 750 or higher win percentage. The Red Raiders are allowing 66% completion rate on the road. Pick here Houston plus 11.5. Mississippi State and Texas A&M for Saturday night. Mississippi State is 4-1 after their 41-34 home defeats at Tennessee. The Bulldogs rushed for 198 yards for 3.5 yards a carry. They allowed 4.1 yards per rush to the Volunteers, but 335 yards passing for 8.4 yards per pass attempt. Blake Shapen, 18 of 29 passing for 180 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Texas A&M with their 16-10 home victory against Auburn here. The Aggies rushed for 207 yards or 4.4 yards to carry with efficiency in the passing game. They limited the Tigers' passing game and allowed 2.2 yards per rush. Marcel Reed here, 15 of 22 passing for 207 yards and a pick. Now, dating back to last year, the Aggies have failed to cover 8 of 9. The Bulldogs have covered 8 of 9 themselves here. Mississippi State getting good quarterback play from Shapen and completing 65% of their passes for 8.2 yards per pass attempt. The Aggies have lacked accuracy at the quarterback position, just over 59% completion rate. Pick here Mississippi State plus 15.5. All right, we've got Kansas and UCF going off on Saturday. Kansas now 3-2 after a 37-34 home defeat to Cincinnati. Jayhawks rushed for 152 yards for 5.5 yards a carry with huge passing performance here. They allowed 603 yards to the Bearcats with poor defense against the run and pass. Jalen Daniels, 19 of 28 passing for 445 yards with 4 touchdowns. He rushed for 55 yards. UCF 3-1 after a 34-20 road defeat at Kansas State. Knights rushed for 205 yards for 6.2 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 266 yards on the ground of the Wildcats for 6 yards a carry with 6.5 yards per pass attempt. Taven Jackson, 12 of 24 passing for 115 yards and a pick. Jayhawks in their lone road game were beaten 42-31 at Missouri. Dating back to last year, they lost 3 out of 4 on the road. In the road loss to the Tigers, the Jayhawks allowed 5.6 yards per rush with 77% completion rate for 334 yards passing. The Knights offense has been getting great play at quarterback, 5.5 yards per rush as well. Kansas 3-6 to the spread as road favorite. Pick here will be on UCF plus 5. Colorado and TCU for Saturday night. Colorado 2-3 after their 24-21 home defeat to BYU. The Buffs rushed for 172 yards for 4.5 yards a carry, but limited in the passing game. They allowed 208 yards rushing to the Cougars with nearly 6 yards a carry. Caden Salter, 11 of 16 passing for 119 yards with a touchdown and pick. He rushed for 49 yards and a score. TCU fell to 3-1 after a 27-24 road win at Arizona State. Horned Frogs blew a 17-0 lead early. They rushed for only 10 yards and were inefficient in the passing game. They allowed 498 yards to the Sun Devils, struggling to stop the run and pass. Hoover in the game, 20 of 32 passing for 242 yards and 2 interceptions. He rushed for a touchdown. TCU didn't rush for 10. They were limited in the rushing game there. We're looking here. Colorado in their lone road game was defeated by 16 at Houston. The Buffs in their road game got poor quarterback play and struggled defending the pass. TCU is getting good quarterback play from Hoover with accuracy, 321 yards per game, 9 yards per pass attempt. Horned Frogs 3-1 the spread as a home favorite of 7.5 to 14 points. Pick here TCU minus 13.5. We got Miami and Florida State going off on Saturday. All right, in this one, we got Miami now 4-0 after a 26-7 home victory against Florida. Hurricane rushed for 184 yards for 4 yards a carry and lacked efficiency in the passing game. They limit the Gators to 80 yards rushing and 61 passing yards. Carson Beck, 17-30 passing for 160 yards and a pick. Florida State drops to 3-1 after a 46-38 home road defeat to Virginia. Seminoles gained 513 yards rushing for 256 yards, 5.5 yards a carry. Defensively, they allowed 211 yards rushing to the Cats for 4.4 yards a carry, along with 6.5 yards per pass attempt. Each team turned it over 3 times. Tommy Castellanos hit 18-32 passes for 264 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. He rushed for 78 yards and a score. Miami plays their first 2 road game. Florida State has a 14-point home win against Alabama. Seminoles at home rushed for over 7 yards a carry with 71% completion rate for 13.7 yards per pass attempt. They have defended the run and pass well at home. Miami 3-5 the spread on the road against the ACC. Pick here Florida State here plus 4.5. Minnesota and Ohio State for Saturday night. Minnesota 3-1 after a 31-28 home victory against Rutgers. The Golden Gophers were held to 35 rushing yards, but moved the football through the air. They held the Scarlet Knights to 3.3 yards a carry, along with 249 yards passing for 7.3 yards per pass attempt. Drake Lindsey, 31-41 passing for 324 yards and 3 touchdowns. Ohio State 4-0 after a 24-6 road win at Washington. The Buckeyes rushed for 149 yards for 4.4 yards a carry with movement in the passing game. They limited the Huskies to 61 yards rushing for 7.5 yards per pass attempt. Julian Sayin, 22-28 passing for 208 yards with 2 touchdowns. Minnesota getting good quarterback play this season with 66% completion rate, 8.4 yards per pass attempt. They have defended the run and pass well. The Golden Gophers 4-1 the spread on the road against winning teams. Pick here Minnesota plus 23.5. Tulsa and Memphis going off on Saturday. Tulsa 2-3 after a 31-14 home defeat to Tulane. The Golden Hurricane rushed for 2.5 yards a carry and moved the football through the air. They surrendered 4.3 yards a carry with 252 passing yards for 7.9 yards per pass attempt. Baylor Haynes here, 18-36 passing for 245 yards with a touchdown and pick. Memphis now 5-0 with a 55-26 road win at FAU. The Tigers gained 487 yards with success in their run and passing game. They limited FAU to 2.6 yards a carry, but 322 yards passing for 6.3 yards per pass attempt. Brendan Lewis, 13 of 19 passing for 196 yards with 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 60 yards and 2 scores. Tulsa offense has struggled running the football with efficiency in the passing game with only 6 yards per pass attempt. The Golden Hurricane defense allowing nearly 5 yards per carry. Memphis averaging 448 yards per game and getting really good quarterback play behind the mobile Lewis who can run and pass with accuracy. Memphis has held opposing quarterbacks at 3.1 yards a carry. Opposing defenses, I should say, opposing defense. Memphis held opposing offenses here to 3.1 yards a carry, 58% completion rates. Tulsa 0-2 as a road dog of 10.5 to 21 points. Memphis has 4 wins against non-power schools, Power 5 schools, and the wins have been by 21 or greater points. Pick here Memphis minus 20. Nevada and Fresno State going off here on Saturday. We got Nevada 1-3 after a 31-16 road defeat to Western Kentucky. Wolfpack rushed for 207 yards for 5.3 yards to carry and limited in the passing game. They allowed 145 yards rushing to the Hilltoppers for 4.4 yards to carry, with 216 yards passing for 6.5 yards per pass attempt. Java Purdy in the game, 16-30 passing for 165 yards, 2 picks. He rushed for 60 yards and a touchdown. Fresno State 4-1 with a 23-21 road win at Hawaii. The Bulldogs were held at 2 yards per rush, but moved the football through the air. They limited the Warriors on the ground and allowed 219 yards passing for only 4.6 yards per pass attempt. E.J. Warner, 22-29 passes for 230 yards with a touchdown. Nevada has rushed effectively, 5 yards to carry, and limited opponents on the ground. Fresno State is allowing opposing quarterbacks to complete 65% of their passes. Wolfpack 4-2 the spread on the road against winning teams. Fresno State 1-3 the spread at home against losing teams. Pick here Nevada plus 13.5. Duke in California first Saturday night. Duke improved to 3-2 after their 38-3 road victory at Syracuse. Blue Devils gained 521 yards with success on the ground and through the air. They limited the Orange on the ground and allowed 229 yards passing for 6.2 yards per pass attempt. They utilized a backup quarterback to their injured starter, their Angeli. Darian Mensah, 22 of 28 passing for 268 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cal now is 4-1 after a 28-24 road win at Boston College. Golden Bears gained 118 yards rushing, 3.2 yards a carry, and moved the football through the air effectively. They allowed 178 yards rushing in the game, but only 5.3 yards per pass. As a matter of fact, they ran for 8.5 yards a carry against them. Jaron King Sagapolete, 22 of 34 passing for 254 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. Tough spot for Duke, back-to-back road spot, this late night nonsense out west, having to travel to these West Coast schools in the ACC. The Golden Bears beat Minnesota by 13 at home in a late night spot. Duke has losses on the road to Tulane and Ole Miss with really poor defensive performances there. Duke on the road allowing 193 yards rushing for 5.5 yards a carry with 269 on the passing yardage for 7.3 yards per pass attempt. The Golden Bears' passing game and defense has been outstanding at home. Duke 1-3 of the spread on the road, facing a team that allows 120 yards rushing or fewer per game. Cal 4-1 of the spread as home dog. Pick here Cal plus the 3. For more free pick videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We have lots of free picks on our channel from myself as well as the team of cappers here at Tony'sPicks.com, making this a great channel to subscribe to. Hit us up with that like, that thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. It really helps us build up our channel. And then visit our site, Tony'sPicks.com, for our best bets. Our premium plays are there. Use that promo code TonyT at checkout, and you'll save that 15% off and get signed up. We're locked and loaded here for this card here on Saturday coming up. That's going to do it for now. I'm Tony T, and we'll talk with you guys later.